I think this is my favorite part of a Zoom meeting is when you just start to see people hop up in the.
It's my very favorite. I miss people.
Mm-hmm.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar, Successful Strategy Sessions that Help Your Buyers Win, with MAPS coaches Sarah Detmore and Jen Davis. Please note this webinar is being recorded and will be available within 24 hours after the webinar has ended on the MAPS Group YouTube channel. You may find the link to the YouTube channel in your Zoom confirmation email, and we will also drop it in the chat. If you have questions for your coach, please type them into the chat located in your webinar taskbar. Following the webinar, if you have any questions about today's call or coaching programs, please email us at fasttrack@kw.com. That's fasttrack@kw.com. That's all from me, coaches. Take it away.
Thank you so much, Carlos, and good morning or afternoon, everybody. Thank you guys so much for joining us. I am MAPS coach Sarah Detmore. I'm here with the lovely MAPS coach Jen Davis. Guys, real quick, if you have the opportunity to join us on camera, we would love to see your beautiful faces. And we just want to thank you guys for taking some time out of your business to join us today. We've got some really fun stuff to talk through. But Jen, before we get started, why don't we just start with some introductions? Tell us who you are and where you're from.
Absolutely. Thanks, Sarah. So my name is Jen Davis. I am based out of Springfield, Missouri. I am a one-on-one MAPS coach and a group coach with you on our Mega Buyer Agent program. I also run a team. So I run a team of 20 people, Holt Homes Group in Springfield, Missouri. Last year, we closed 538 transactions with 6 agents in production. So we run what we call a team dependent model, which is we provide a majority of the leads and administrative support. This year, we're on track to close over 600. Half of those will be buy side, right? So even in this crazy market, we are still having a ton of success with our buyers. So really excited for this 30 minutes with you, Sarah, as always. So introduce yourself to everybody. I know you and they should know you.
Yes, well, it's debatable. Thank you if they should know me, but you're going to know me anyway. So, and Jen, to your point, right, of the level of buyer business that your team is doing right now, that's kind of where this content was born from, right? We recognize that even in a very, very seller charged market, we were still finding some high success in getting buyers under contract. So that's a lot about what we're going to talk about today in these strategy sessions that cause our buyers' offers to get accepted. But that's not about me. My name is Sarah Detmore. I am with the Loken Group out of Houston, Texas. And just like Jen's team with Holt Homes Group, we run a very strong team dependent model. I serve as our vice president of our buyer agent team. We have a buyer team of, I think we're at 16 now, if you include me, and our entire team, the Loken Group, we have about 100 agents on our team right now. Just last year, we closed 426 buy-side units, and so far this year, we've closed or pended 338. So we are going to land somewhere, I would say, towards the end of 600, the close to 600 buy-side units this year, depending on how the next few months shake out. So stay tuned. Anyhow, I also serve as a MAPS coach. I co-coach our group coaching program, the Mega Buyer Agent with Jen, as she mentioned. And I also serve as a role play Rumble coach that's powered by MAPS. So lots of great stuff we got going on today, guys. And we're going to jump right in here. And when we say strategy session, that's kind of what we've pivoted to call our former buyer consultation, right? In a super active market, we started to recognize that sometimes you can over consult a buyer. If it's a buyer who's maybe done repeat business with you, a buyer who's bought more than one house, they might, in this active market, might not be open or have the time really to sit down and go through a full buyer consultation. So we want to start out by talking about ways in which you can still set some really stellar expectations with your buyers and kind of a condensed consultation that we're calling a strategy session. So Jen, why don't you jump in here and share with us, what expectations we set specifically and how we get success in the process with our buyer when we set those expectations the right way.
Sarah, I think you and I are students of our craft, right? So you and I often look at language patterns. And so what we were seeing in this market, a consultation, the verbiage no longer matched the urgency of the market. So we made an adjustment in our language patterns, which actually made our buyers feel more confident in our abilities to secure them a property. So when we're meeting with our buyers, whether that's a traditional consultation or a strategy session, what we want to make sure is that they understand the market that we're in, right? They understand what it takes to compete. And so by that, what I mean by that is we have to explain what's going on in the market. And we have to read our buyers. Are they data driven or emotion driven, right? So I've got to appeal to whatever personality type we're really working with. So for those that are really detail driven or data driven, we want to make sure that they understand the market with some good statistics, right? We want them to understand, what does it take for them to compete? By what does it take? Does that mean price? Does that mean other terms that we will get into later in the program, some other options outside of price? You know, what can we do to compete? What we're setting the stage for them so that we can understand what level of motivation they have, and if they're a buyer that we can help right now. We also want to set expectations about how many homes we're going to show in one appointment. Right now, the market is doing the heavy lifting for us in that, right? There's not a ton of properties to show. However, what we want to talk about today are best practices, not common practices. So our best practice is still to set the expectation that in any market, there's really probably only one or two great fits for your buyer for the home that they want to purchase. And so we need to set that expectation that we expect, because of the strategy session, that they may only look at one property before they secure the one of their dreams, right? So we want to make sure we're setting that expectation. On the communication side, when are they available? When can they go look? And let's forward pace them to let's pre-book that appointment. If they can only work in the evening, or they can only look in the evenings, well, let's find the best evening that works for our calendar too, and our families and our friends. And let's pre-book that appointment, whether we have a house to show them or not. So what I mean by that is, if I pre-book the appointment, Sarah, so we meet on a Monday for a strategy session, and they can look Thursday evening and that matches my schedule, then Sarah, what I would say to you is, Sarah, you know what? I know that I'm going to do a search for you as soon as we're done with this strategy session. I'm going to find you the best one or two options. Let's just plan right now on meeting Thursday evening at 6, and I'll call you with the address and where to meet me, right? Mm-hmm. So two things happen then. I forward pace you. I got you on my calendar. You're important to me. You understand that you're important to me. And my week can't slide away from me without getting you in. Second thing is, there's some inherent pressure then for me to find you a house for us to take a look at. And then we also want to talk about, if we're setting great expectations, what it looks like to be a well-qualified buyer in this market. So when we talk about being pre-approved or what financing options are, we need to make sure that they understand that they're not a buyer in this market if they don't have their financing in order. And we're not going to do them any favors if we don't have that direct communication with them. So what I found is, when we have those hard conversations or clear conversations early on, the rest of our relationship with those buyers becomes easier. Hard conversations, easy life. Easy conversations, hard life. So we've got to really dive into this pre-approval, and the financing doesn't necessarily get hard. I don't mean awkward or uncomfortable. I just mean, we can't take you out until you've done this next step. And once you've done this next step, we're immediately going to go out. However, until that happens, I would be doing you a disservice, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, if we go to take a look at a house that then you can't compete on. What did I miss?
Jen, you will, like always, you never miss anything. And I think it's just worth noting that there are some names and faces on this call that I recognize. And so I want to make sure that, yes, we're talking about best practices here, and you take those best practices and adapt to what we specifically have to say based on the market. These are all things that we would want to communicate with a buyer in our very first consultation, strategy session, whatever you want to call it, no matter the circumstances, right? And a couple of things to add is, when it comes to the market, and I don't know about you guys, but here in Houston, we're starting to see things change ever so slightly. That's not to say we're not going to rubber band and bounce back to where we were a couple months ago. Yet when it comes to, in certain price points, I'd imagine, I mean, even in Houston, certain price points, we are always in a very charged seller's market in a lower price point. Yet you can explain to your buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, we have two ways in which we can enter the market. May I explain? We can look at houses one day on market, brand new listing, be very competitive, maybe more aggressive, write an offer sight unseen, or we can look at houses that have been on the market a little bit longer, aged inventory. That doesn't mean they're bad houses. That just means that they might have been overpriced. They might have mismatched flooring. I don't know if that's every market or just here, but there are some houses I walk into, and right inside the front door, I see at least 4 different types of flooring. And I'm like, who lived here, right? And those kind of things turn buyers off. So, but the guys, the power of choice in a strategy session, if I'm giving a buyer two things that they don't want to do, but they can choose which one they would rather pick over the other, that gives the buyer more confidence going into the entire process with you. Because if they chose to look at age inventory, they chose to perhaps avoid competition going that route, they won't be disappointed when they see that houses have 9 different types of flooring, or they see that there might be wallpaper with, you know, Disney characters on it in the kitchen, right? Those kind of things are already understood and appreciated because the buyer made that decision. So it's not that we have to tell the buyer it's this and only this, no ifs, ands, or buts. It's, hey, we have two options here, Mr. or Mrs. Buyer, which one feels best for you? And then we can move them forward either way, as long as they understand what, you know, what the requirements are. I also love, Jen, that you shared the forward pace and the buyer on your calendar. Guys, show of hands real quick. How many of you have had to change your plans last minute to get a buyer into a house recently? And I don't know about you, Catherine, you're on my screen. I saw you raise your hand. I love you. Because we're not the only ones. And how frustrating is it when I'm like, yes, husband, let's go on a date tonight. And then, oh, just kidding. I can't meet you for dinner because I have to go show this house for this buyer. That doesn't feel good for us or for our whoever we already have a commitment to, but it feels good for the buyer. And chances are, guys, the buyer doesn't write an offer on that house anyway. So when you future pace the buyer, like Jen said, you make them feel important, which is what's going to make them feel valued, make them want to be in partnership with you in business. And you're not having to drop what you're doing later to go and show them a house or try to wedge them in somewhere where they might not fit anyway. So I loved all of that. Okay. Audrey raised her hand, and I don't know if that was a purposeful hand raise. Audrey, did you have a question?
Maybe she just had to show a buyer that
wasn't
on her
at this time. I was just saying that, yes, I've been in that situation.
A virtual hand raise. I love that, Audrey. Thank you.
We appreciate that. I love participation.
You know, Jen, for some reason, I thought we had an hour and realized we have 30 minutes. So I'm going to move on. That's my fault, guys.
That's okay.
It's a bad habit. Okay. Let's talk about how we regroup with our buyers and the importance of the regroup conversation after each showing appointment. So again, guys, this is something that we want to, we're talking best practices here. We're talking about things that we want to embed and implement into our process to where after every house I show, my goal from every showing is going to be to write an offer. And if I'm not writing an offer, I need to take a step back and talk to my buyer and find out why. Find out what's holding them back from making an offer on this house, because I would have already embedded in our strategy session that we're only going to see houses that I know that they'd make an offer on. So if they're not making an offer, I got to take a step back and find out why. So here are a couple scripts that you guys can jot down. Take a picture of this screen. You'll get an email with a recording of this this webinar as well. So this is a script that we might use, a conversation rather, that we might use if I'm talking to a buyer or we want to regroup after a showing. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, based on what you and I spoke about at our strategy session, I was certain that the house at 123 Main Street was the perfect house for you. I'm curious, what are you still looking for that we have not seen yet? So guys, this is a question I might ask a buyer if, based on the conversation that we had, based on their time frame, based on their motivation, based on their criteria, this house checked all those boxes. I get super excited to show them the house. We walk through it and then they don't want to make an offer. I need to find out why. And there are ways in which I could say, I must have missed something. Chances are I didn't miss anything, but it gets them thinking about what could be holding them back from making an offer on that house. Okay. Especially if I say, gosh, I was certain that this was the house for you. What did I miss? What are you still looking for we haven't seen yet? Again, chances are they're not looking for anything else. They're just afraid to make an offer on the first house you show them. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, when we met last week, you told me how important it is for you to get to Springfield by the end of August. I'm just curious, what might happen if you don't get to Springfield by the end of August? What is your backup plan? And Jen, I love the example that you gave here on a backup plan. Why don't you share that?
So here's what we know, guys. When someone has a very detailed backup plan. So if Sarah asked me that question and she said, Jen, if you're not in Springfield by August, what's going to happen? And I said, oh, I'm going to live with my best friend's ex-husband's cousin, and I'm going to sleep on the red couch, and my kids are going to sleep on these two couches, and I get to bring my dog, and I get to do all these things, and I have a very detailed backup plan. What that means to Sarah as the buyer's agent is I'm not actually buying a house. She somehow in our consultation missed my motivation and timeline. So the Springfield by August wasn't accurate. So when we look at this, the more detailed plan B is, the more likely plan B is plan A. So these regroup scripts can help you stop after 1 or 2 showings so that you don't get into 40 or 50 showings. Right? Ooh. So it gives you a very natural conversation to say, what's going on? What's happening? And they give you a very detailed backup plan. Totally fine, guys. We still love them. We're still going to help them. We're not still going to put them in our car. And well, we're not really doing that now anyway, but we're really not going to still show them people's houses until their motivation moves up, right? So we're going to put them on a follow-up plan, and Sarah kind of guide us into this. I mean, this guides us perfectly into the next script, right?
Yes, definitely. And on the flip side of that with the backup plan, Jen, yes, when their backup plan is so clear and picture perfect, we're like, okay, well, you've obviously thought this through. Yet for the buyers that go, Jen, I don't have a backup plan. I'm going to be homeless if I don't buy a house by the end of August. That's an opportunity for me as the agent to say, gosh, Jen, and I knew that, right? When we met last week, I knew how important this time frame was for you. My concern is that if we keep doing what we're currently doing, we're not going to get you that house in Springfield by the end of August. Can we agree that it's time for us to re-strategize to make sure that you are moving into your home by the end of August? Awesome.
So, it gives me a chance to regroup on my criteria, right? What will I give up? Do I want to move to that aged inventory that you talked about earlier? Do I maybe not want to compete?
Exactly. And then one more conversation that you can start here with a buyer. Again, this might be a buyer that you've been showing houses to, like Jen said, maybe 2 or 3, 4 houses, not 40. We don't want to get to 40 or 50 houses. And that's you wake up in the middle of the night and like a deep sweat and you're like, oh my gosh, I've shown them so many houses. What am I doing? That's never good for anybody. So Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I always want my motivation to match your motivation. We've seen some great homes and have not yet written an offer. What's changed? And again, chances are nothing's changed, but sometimes these questions of, what are you still looking for we haven't seen yet? What's your backup plan? What's changed? These are like pattern interrupt questions, because chances are, guys, you're the only agents who are going to ask questions like these. Most agents are going to go, okay, let's see more houses. Let's see more houses. Let's see more houses. And then they're going to work with the buyer for 2 years, and that buyer's never going to buy a house. So these pattern interrupt questions can just cause us to get from point to point B that much faster. Jen, I trust you're going to say something brilliant, so go ahead.
Well, I think what I was going to say is you and I both know the more houses we show a buyer, the less likely that they have less faith in us, right? The more houses we show a buyer, the buyer actually no longer believes that we're the expert in the field. Mm-hmm. So the flip side of that motivation, which I would be interested in your opinion on, we have seen some great homes and have not yet written an offer. This can also go with Mr. and Mrs. Buyer. I always want my motivation to match your motivation. We have written several homes. We've written offers on several homes and have yet to have an offer accepted. What do you think is going on, right? So we can also then flip it if they are writing and losing. At some point, we are the expert. We are giving them advice, but we need to know where the disconnect is. And I think you're exactly right, Sarah. Most agents don't ask the question. We assume what the problem is, and we try to solve it without actually asking them any follow-up questions.
I have a question, Sarah.
Yes.
Hi, I'm Tavia Melton. I'm new to the MAPS coaching.
Hi, Tavia.
And this is actually good, and I can't wait to share this with my buyer's agent. What happens though, because I like the other lady was just saying, I don't see her on my screen anymore. We have had a few buyers that kept losing offers because we know how the market is, what Jen was saying. We know how the market is right now. And then sometimes, I don't know if anyone else is going through this, but they sometimes tend to blame you.
Of course.
They tend to blame you if they keep missing out, if they don't have the finances to compete with the other offers. And then all of a sudden they're not motivated to even buy at all. And I've had a couple, they didn't say that, but they were tending to blame us, like, well, what's going on? And then at that point, when do you, or can anyone on the call say you get to a point where you feel this may just not be the buyer for you? And how do
Tavia,
you say that after asking these questions? Because
yeah, and
I call them my come to Jesus meetings. That's what I
sure.
call them, when I bring them back to the table and I've actually done these things, but I've actually lost a couple of clients this year with them. They didn't say it, and I asked, well, are you upset with me? Because a lot of times they don't listen to what I say in order to put them in a position to win. And I do what they want me to do, but then when they keep losing, then the motivation drops, and then they start, the attitude is kind of like I said, maybe I'm not the expert, or maybe I don't know what, maybe we don't know what we're doing to get them into a home. So
For
what do
sure.
you do at this point if you're asking these questions? So how do you know at that point when it's time to refer, so you don't lose all your time with this person? Or, that's what I need advice.
Yeah, Tavia, let's hold that thought real quick. We're going to have a quick Q&A here at the end. We got a couple more
Okay.
slides that we want to share, but I did jot
Okay.
that down here, and we'll come
Okay.
back to that, okay? Because I think that's a great
Okay.
question. So Jen, let's talk real quick and about ways in which, as a fiduciary to a buyer, we can actually, I pose the question all the time: if the MLS disappeared today, what would you do differently than you're doing right now? And there's a way in which, and I think as a fiduciary, we can find inventory for our buyers when inventory is low.
That's exactly right. I think Sarah, you and I look at this differently, right, than a lot of agents. And so I congratulate those of you that are on the call, because what this means is that you are a great agent. You're not average. You're unwilling to settle for what's happening in your market. So when Sarah and I look at, if inventory is the issue, we have to solve the issue, right? So Sarah and I are solution based. So if there's a problem, we can find a solution for it. We're all licensed agents. We don't have to wait for something to hit the MLS. In certain price points in certain markets, if it hits the MLS, it's too late. You're too late. And so we've got to get in front of it. And in a way to get in front of it, here are some options. One of them is to door knock. Now, I know that there are different COVID regulations and restrictions and things in different places. So door knock is one option. Circle prospecting would be potentially in this environment and also maybe a better option. Circle prospecting or circle dialing is us going to find inventory for our buyers. So if Sarah's moving to Springfield, she gives me the subdivision that she wants to live in. I can actually find the information from all of the homeowners in the subdivision, and I can call them. And it sounds something like this: hi, is this the owner of 123 Main Street? They say yes. Fantastic. Hey, I've got a buyer that's looking to purchase in your area. Do you know of any of your neighbors that are getting ready to sell? We usually start with the neighbor, softens them up a little bit. They say yes or no. And then we ask them if they've thought about buying or if they've thought about selling. We congratulate them on making a good purchase, right? They purchase in a great neighborhood that's highly desirable. And then what we're asking though is we're trying to get a footprint, right? We're trying to actively drum up business for our buyers. We also can call listing agents that have pending listings, right? I know that there was a question that came up in the chat box about buyer's remorse, right? Buyers right now make decisions and they are worried about it. Guess what? Other agents are working with those same buyers. So we might call the listing agent of a house that we missed out on and either number one, put in a backup offer, or number two, see how it's actually going. Is it going well? Are they through inspections? Are they through appraisals? Do we have a shot at it before it comes back on the market? Or what other listings do they have in that area that are getting ready to come on the market? And then the use of social media, making sure that people know what your buyer needs are. We can talk to them about, I'm looking for a house in Rivercut that has 4 bedrooms, 3 bathrooms, 3,500 square feet. The more specific you are, potentially you're going to have somebody that responds to you. You can also use social media to tell your success story. Guess what? Our buyers are still winning 89% of the time, right? We're still able to match make. So you can use social media in a variety of different ways to bring in business. And then making sure that we call our database, those people that bought 3 to 5 years ago in a totally different market, and make sure that they know what the equity is that they have in their home. Mr. and Mrs. Past Client, hey, I just want to let you know, I just sold a house down the street from you. We bought at a great time. I just wanted to make sure that you knew what was going on in the market. Keep in mind, most people don't know what a seller's market means to them. Mr. and Mrs. Past Client, you purchased for $250,000 in, let's say, 2016. I just sold a property down the street for $350,000. Did you know that your value has increased over $100,000 in 5 years, right? Making sure that we're actually tying in what seller's market means to the people in our database, that's the value add on the call.
You know, Jen, and I love that too, because you're right. Most homeowners aren't that clear on the amount of equity that they might have. And especially if they're a forever client of yours, you probably owe them a call anyway. And that's the value add. Like you said, oftentimes we're hesitant to pick up the phone and make a phone call. It's not the actual dialing and making the phone call that causes us to hesitate. It's that we fear we don't add value. That's a huge value add call, guys, especially with what's been happening because of COVID and job insecurity. Somebody's equity in their home, should they choose to sell, could be life-changing.
That's right.
It's a powerful phone call. So guys, we'd be doing you a disservice if we didn't talk to you more about the group coaching program that we have here launching September 1st. We talk about these things in much more detail and much more depth in our Mega Buyer Agent Group program. You'll get Jen and I for 6 full weeks. The investment is just $198, and that actually equals out to a little over $30 a week. When you choose to take this course, what you can expect by the end of 6 weeks is to have a revamped script book that you can have at your disposal for any situation you might find yourself in with a buyer, pre-qualing, lead generating, showing, negotiating. You'll have a script book intact that you can take with you. We'd love for you to join us. Again, we launch September 1st, and you can go to mapscoaching.com/group to sign up and join us for our coaching program. Now, and there's a link. Jessica, I should have known that you were here. Jessica just jumped in the chat. She's there. So guys, let's go into some Q&A. I want to circle back to the question that Tavia had. And my perspective is that when you're working with a buyer, if they're not listening to you as a professional, if they're not making competitive offers, if they're not wanting to do what it takes right now to secure a home, again, this is me being maybe more passive aggressive. I might in a regroup conversation say, well, gosh, Jen, may I share a concern of mine with you? Yes. I don't know if you're a buyer for this market. And I would leave it at that, because one of two things is going to happen. Jen's going to go, you know what, Sarah, maybe I'm not. I don't have the ability to compete right now. I don't, maybe something's changed in her world and she just flat out isn't a buyer for our market right now. And that's okay. I think that's the big thing, is we have to be okay losing some buyers, because if we keep doing the square peg round hole thing, that's going to waste your time and waste their time. And that's not going to have a high ROI. Or if I call that out to Jen and I say, you just might not be a buyer for our market right now, she might say, yes, I am. What do you mean? I've got to buy, blah, 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 blah. And if that's where that conversation goes, great, I can take it and run with it. Let's reset expectations and make sure that the next offer we write is the offer that gets accepted for you.
Well, and Sarah, just to piggyback on that, I think you're exactly right. I also will start with the question of, Sarah, why do you think your offers aren't being accepted? Mm-hmm. And then what happens is Sarah's going to give me some information based on her perspective, because she's still the client. Client's always right? So Tavia, my thought would be, if I ask Sarah the question and she gives me the answer, what I'm looking for is I'm going to educate or I'm going to validate. And if she's giving me information that maybe is not the real reason that we're losing offers, that's my opportunity to educate her in a very kind and careful way. If she gives me an answer that's right, where she's like, I guess maybe we're going to have to waive inspections, or we're going to have to, pay an appraisal gap, or we're going to have to do these other things, then yes, then I validate what Sarah's saying. Sarah, I think you're right. But sometimes people need to say it out loud to themselves in order to come to terms with it. I also think I would relook at your strategy session. Are you setting the right expectations at the beginning? And then within 2 to 3 houses are going back and then going back through those expectations. And then Sarah, I think we have one more question from Madison in the chat box.
Yeah, and I actually love this question. So the question, guys, reads, how do you navigate the fear of putting an offer in on that first perfect home? I've had a lot of buyers regret letting that first house go. How do we help them understand it is the home for them without feeling like we're pushing them into a decision that they might not be ready to make? Madison, my answer to that is, what a great opportunity you have in your next strategy session to share this story.
Yep.
And you can say, Mr. Buyer, Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, when it comes to home shopping, let's talk about what that looks like. We set expectations on the number of houses that we'll see. And gosh, Mr. Buyer, you might be surprised, because I know that you're searching on the internet, and because we're taking the time right now to really understand what you're looking for in your next home and how my team and I can help you get there. Don't be surprised if the very first house we see is the house that you want to buy. So you're already embedding in their mind that the first house you see is probably the house they're going to want to buy. And then, Madison, you've got extra ammo, because you can say, let me share with you, a few other buyers of mine chose to keep looking after the first house, and they actually regretted it. And Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, I don't want that. I don't want you to feel that way. And you don't either, do you?
Oh, it's perfect, Sarah. That was such a good script. That's my favorite one.
Right? Like, no one wants to feel regret. But anyhow, that's where I would take that, only because, and for, it might not work on any buyers you're already in process with if you've already missed the first one, but moving forward, guys, and anybody can use that story. You can say, gosh, an agent I know, you don't have to give a name, a KW agent that I know has these clients, they missed out on the first house because they chose to keep looking, and they just have regretted it ever since. Mr. and Mrs. Buyer, you don't want to have that regret, do you? Woo. Tina, some sellers are worried about appraisal. What about higher sales prices? What specifically about higher sales prices? I know we're out of time, guys. If you need to hop off, go ahead. But I do want to get Tina's question answered. So Tina, what specifically about higher prices?
Sometimes the prices are going extremely over. There was a house that one of my buyers looked at, and it went $26,000 over asking price.
Sure.
And they don't want to pay that if it doesn't appraise. So they're kind of reluctant to put offers in on things.
So Jen, how would you handle that?
One of two ways. I think you could either look at it, and that is the market that we're in, unfortunately. I mean, that is the market that we're in. So I would go back to their motivation and timeline and potentially see if they don't have the cash to compete on those kind of reserves, we may drop their price point a little bit, so that we have a little bit more wiggle room. The other option would be, are they comfortable paying some of the things for the sellers? So, right. So like if we're looking at a gap of, let's say that $26,000, would they be willing to pay the seller's closing costs? Would they be willing to waive inspections? Would they be willing to potentially pay the commission instead of having the seller pay the commission, right? If they're worried about appraised value and they have cash still to put forward, what you could do is they could basically allow the sellers to sell their house for free, and they pay for agent commissions or some other things. If they really can't budge or they really won't go over it, I think that comes back to motivation and timeline. If they truly are a buyer in today's market, they have to be willing to do whatever it takes to win, or we really can't be showing them right now. We just need to put them on a follow-up plan.
And again, Jen, I love that too, because, and it's up to us, right, as the agent, to have that mindset of not every buyer you talk to is a absolute right now buyer, and that's okay. They might think that they want to be a right now buyer. Their friend is buying a house right now. They know how low interest rates are. That might be a thought right now. And then once they hear more about what's actually happening, if they can't commit to paying $26,000 over asking price, that's okay. Right now might not be the market for you, and that's okay. We have to make sure that they know it's okay. We have to make sure we know it's okay, because if you think of it as well, I don't want to lose a buyer, I've got to make it work. You're not losing a buyer. You're just setting yourself up to have a buyer in the future. So, and Angela, and I think it's not actually Angela, it's somebody else under Angela's name, but it says it costs buyers nothing to make an offer. An offer could open up negotiations. And sometimes buyers have to miss out on the first one to really understand what they need to do differently. So anyway, guys, I know we're a couple minutes past the half hour. This is, we could probably talk for days about this, and we will when you join us for the Mega Buyer Agent starting September 1st. We have an hour of time together once a week on a Wednesday for us to talk through all kinds of things buyers. We hope you'll join us. We trust that you guys got some value in today's conversation. If you have any questions for Jen or I, please reach out to us. We are very accessible. We want to make sure we're here as resources for you. You can reach out to us through Maps. You can reach out to us on Facebook. I mean, we're pretty pretty much everywhere. So we trust that you guys will have a great rest of your day and rest of your week. Thank you again for joining us, and have a wonderful afternoon, guys. See you later.
Bye, Sarah. Bye, everybody.
Bye.
Thank you.